"What are you trying to do, brother?" Prince Obinna asked, breaking the silence. "What do you mean, baby brother?" "I'm talking about Winnie. Why are you interested in her? She's not your type of girl. You've always loved pretty girls." Hearing his words, Prince Arinzi began to laugh. After a while, he nodded. "You know me too well, baby brother. She's not my type, but over time, my type has changed." In the village of Umune, located in the heart of Imo State, within the Ikeduru local government area, the night was quiet and calm. All the villagers had retired to their beds. Normally, they didn't sleep this early, but there was a rumor going around, one that had stirred excitement and tension alike. The prince of their land had returned from abroad, and before he could be bestowed the title of Crown Prince of the Umuneke Kingdom, he needed to take a bride. As a result, a meeting had been scheduled for the following morning, summoning all the maidens of the kingdom who were eligible for marriage to the palace. The king of Umuneke had 2 wives, and together they had 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. The queen, his first wife, had given birth to a son and a daughter, and the second wife had done the same. Although the second wife had her son before the queen did, tradition dictated that only the first wife could bear the child who would become the crown prince. Unless the queen's son died, the second wife's son could never ascend the throne. He would remain just a prince. This tradition made the queen anxious. She could see that her co-wife was quietly making moves, also hoping to secure the throne for her own son. Sensing the subtle competition, the queen quickly set out to find a suitable bride for her son, before her rival could get ahead of her. All the families in the village were excited to send their daughters to the palace the next day, and the maidens could hardly wait for dawn to arrive. However, there was one family that didn't share in the excitement, the family of Mazi Daik. Mazi Daik was a very wealthy businessman who dealt in foodstuffs. He regularly traveled to the city to buy goods in large quantities, which he then sold to the villagers. He owned about 10 different shops and employed up to 50 workers, all of whom he paid handsomely. His house was the grandest in the village, second only to the palace itself. Even the king had no choice but to accord him a certain level of respect. Mazi Daik was a hard-working man in his late 40s. His wife, Akuna, was a beautiful woman in her late 30s. She had married him at the age of 19, and together they had only one child, a daughter named Winnie, who was now 20 years old. Winnie was her father's only concern. As a child, she had been sweet and obedient, the kind of daughter every parent wished for. But everything changed when she hit adolescence. Since then, Mazi Daik had lost count of how many people he had begged or paid off just to keep his daughter out of trouble. Complaints constantly poured in about Winnie beating people up. And what baffled him the most was that she wasn't big or muscular, so he often wondered where she got the strength to fight, and more importantly, who she took after. Winnie could best be described as a tomboy. In fact, if she had been born a boy, she would have been a fine-looking one. But as a girl, she had an average appearance, just like her father, though she inherited her mother's kind heart. Being the only child of wealthy parents, most people expected Winnie to be a pampered princess who spent her days dressing up and living in luxury. But Winnie was the complete opposite. If not for her fair, beautiful skin and the expensive, boyish outfits she wore, no one would believe she came from a rich home. One thing everyone knew about Winnie was that she loved trouble. She never ran from it. In fact, it seemed to follow her around. Her reputation in the village was well known. One week, one trouble. But somehow, her father's money always managed to shield her from the consequences. That particular night, Winnie was in her room, completely absorbed in a video game her father had bought for her during one of his trips to the city. She was yelling at her players on screen when her mother quietly walked in. "Child, the night is already far gone. Won't you go to bed?" Oena asked as she sat beside her on the bed. "I'm home all day tomorrow, so I can stay up all night," Winnie replied, eyes still glued to the screen, fingers moving quickly over the controller. Oena stared at her daughter for a moment. Her daughter, who insisted on keeping her hair low-cut instead of plaiting it like the other maidens in the village. She shook her head and walked over to the wardrobe. As she opened it, a deep sigh escaped her lips. Winnie had shoved all her pretty, carefully chosen dresses to one side, leaving space neatly arranged for her collection of male clothes. Oena began sorting through the dresses until her eyes settled on a long, elegant blue gown with a high slit down the side. She admired it for a moment, then nodded to herself and walked over to her daughter, still engrossed in the game. Without warning, she took the remote and switched off the console. "Mom, why now?" Winnie protested with a slight yell. "Now, young lady, sit down. I want to talk to you," her mother said firmly. Winnie, hearing the seriousness in her tone, sighed and set the controller aside. She sat beside her, folding her arms. "All right, I'm here. Tell me what's disturbing your beauty sleep." "Are you aware that the Crown Prince is back and has summoned all eligible maidens to the palace tomorrow?" her mother asked. Still not seeing what that had to do with her, Winnie shook her head. "I have no idea." "How would you know when you don't even have a single female friend? Always hanging around with boys." Oena rolled her eyes. Winnie shrugged. "Mom, girls are so boring. They have nothing serious to talk about. But boys are fun, they..." "Enough!" Oena cut in, not in the mood for one of Winnie's usual speeches. "I didn't come here to listen to how exciting your male friends are. What I came to tell you is this. Tomorrow morning, you'll be among the maidens going to greet the prince at the palace." Winnie burst out laughing, like her mother had just cracked the funniest joke of the year. But when she saw the serious expression on her face, her laughter faded. "Wait! Mother, are you serious?" she asked, raising a brow. "I don't believe I would give up my precious beauty sleep just to joke with you, young lady," Oena replied firmly. "Your father and I have decided. You're going to the palace tomorrow, and that's final." Winnie shook her head. "No, Mother, you can't do this to me. I'm your only child. How do you expect me to survive in the palace where hate rules?" She grabbed her mother's arm, her voice anxious. "Wait! Isn't sending me there just a waste of time? There's no way the prince would even look my way. Look at me. I don't even look like a lady. Mother, let's forget about this. I promise to behave from now on, okay?" Oena smiled softly, rubbing her daughter's low-cut hair. "Winnie, my daughter, you look everything like a lady, if only you'd start dressing like one." Then, with a tone that signaled finality, she added, "Your father and I have made our decision. You're going to the palace tomorrow, and whether the prince chooses you or not, we'll leave that to the gods." "You know that's not fair," Winnie protested. "I'm not going. I refuse to go. I'm too young for marriage, so I won't go. I got married at 19 and had you at 20, same age as you are now. So yes, you are more than ready for marriage," her mother replied sternly, her tone leaving no room for argument. Still, Winnie wasn't ready to give up. She changed her strategy, her voice softening as she blinked dramatically, like a baby begging for candy. "My sweet mother," she cooed. "I'm your only child, oh. Don't send me to the den of wolves, eh?" She sniffled, faking tears. But Oena knew her daughter too well. Realizing the tears were fake, she simply played along, shaking her head with a small laugh. Wiping away her fake tears, Akuna continued in a calm, deliberate voice. Winnie, my sweet girl, if there's anyone fit to be sent to the den of wolves, it's you. Do you remember how many times your father and I had to settle with people after you beat up their children? Or how many times we had to pay off village thugs just so they'd stop picking fights with you? Winnie twitched her lips and stopped pretending to cry. Mother, you're mean, she muttered. Akuna laughed and stood up, pointing to the blue dress laid out on the bed. You're wearing that dress to the palace tomorrow. No excuses. She walked to the door and turned slightly. Remember, I'm the only one who goes soft on you. Your father might just bundle you to the palace himself if you try any nonsense. Then, narrowing her eyes just a bit, she added, And Winnie, don't even think about escaping. If you try it, your father won't hesitate to burn all your male clothes, and your favorite game too. She opened the door, then paused. Good night, child. You've got a long day ahead of you. With that, she stepped out, gently closing the door behind her, leaving Winnie frustrated, helpless, and staring at the blue dress like it was her worst nightmare. But Winnie knew better than to try escaping this time, especially since her father had given her a final warning. The next time she caused trouble, he'd pay the police to lock her up for weeks. Not that she was scared of prison, she wasn't. But the thought of her mother feeling bad or falling out with her father was what really bothered her. Winnie could be stubborn, but she still cared deeply about her mother. After all, she was the only one she had, and there would be no replacing her. Lying down on her bed, an idea suddenly popped into her head, and she smiled to herself. She would go to the palace, of course, but if they thought she'd show up in a princess dress, they were sorely mistaken. Winnie was determined to do everything in her power to get herself disqualified right away. She thought this with a grin on her face as she drifted off to sleep, unaware that fate had a completely different plan for her at the palace. The next day, very early in the morning, most of the beautiful eligible maidens had already set out for the palace. None of them wanted to be late or risk disqualification. After all, they all dreamed of becoming the next queen of the land. Winnie woke up before her parents. She slipped into the outfit her mother had laid out for her on the bed. Then, in a school bag, she packed her usual clothes: a pair of black shorts, a white polo, and a black jacket. The only makeup she wore was a pair of shining moles on her ears. She applied some hair cream, grabbed her phone and earpieces, and quietly stepped out of her room. At first, she planned to sneak out of the house unnoticed. But on second thought, she paused, turned around, and walked to her parents' room. She knocked on the door, and without waiting for them to open it, called out from outside, "Mother, Father, I'm heading to the palace for the meeting." From inside the room, her parents stared at each other in surprise. Though they had held on to a tiny hope that their daughter would obey them, they never expected her to be this punctual. Without saying a word, they rushed out of the room, only to find her retracing her steps. Their shock deepened when they saw that she was actually wearing a dress. "My husband, is that really our daughter? In a dress?" Akuna asked, her voice laced with amazement. Mazi Dyke sighed heavily. Who knows what trick she has up her sleeve this time? Sometimes I feel like sending her to the palace was a grave mistake. "How can you say that about your only child?" Akuna asked, her expression darkening with a frown. "Please, my daughter doesn't carry bad energy. She's just a special child." With that, she shot him a sharp glare and turned back toward their room, slightly annoyed. She wasn't about to let anyone badmouth her daughter, not even her husband. The palace. The building stood tall and magnificent, with the statue of a huge lion proudly displayed in the center of the compound. Guards and maids, all dressed in elegant uniforms, moved briskly about, making preparations for the grand ceremony. A few maidens arrived in pairs, each being directed to the hall where the others were gathered. The palace was alive with activity and excitement that morning. Prince Obina's room. A gentle knock sounded at the door before it creaked open. Princess Ifeoma, a stunning young woman in her early 20s, adorned in graceful royal attire, stepped inside with a warm smile. "Hey bro, getting ready for the big day?" she asked, moving to sit beside her brother, Prince Obina, on the bed. Prince Obina, a handsome young man with a rich dark complexion and also in his early 20s, closed the book he had been reading and sat up, visibly tired. "What if I say I'm not ready yet?" he asked, letting out a sigh. "Would that be enough to cancel this whole thing?" Princess Ifeoma chuckled lightly. "Come on, bro. You know why mother is pushing for this. Don't forget, you're not the only prince in this kingdom. And everyone knows father's second wife is determined to make her son the crown prince." Prince Obina shrugged nonchalantly. "I really don't mind. He can have the title for all I care. I didn't spend years studying to become a doctor just to come home and pick out a random bride. I mean, most of these village girls are illiterate. None of them meet my standards. Don't let mother hear you say such awful things," Princess Ifeoma scolded with a frown, then quickly shifted to a more excited tone. "I get where you're coming from, really. You know that as crown prince, you're expected to marry someone from the kingdom. That's why I've already picked someone special for you. Her name is Ugma. She's everything you could want in a woman. Educated, beautiful, and from a wealthy family." Feeling completely uninterested, Prince Obina simply smiled and nodded to please her. "All right, I'll check her out later. But for now, you've got to go. I need to get ready." "Yes!" Princess Ifeoma beamed, standing up with excitement. "I'll let you get ready then," she said with a smile, before dashing out to share the good news with her best friend, Ugma. Winnie had already changed out of her blue dress and stuffed it into her black school bag. She swapped it for her usual outfit, a pair of black shorts, a white shirt, black sneakers, and a matching black watch. With her hair tucked neatly and her outfit perfectly styled, she looked exactly like a handsome young man. She slung her bag over her shoulder and made her way toward the palace. When she arrived at the gate man looked confused. He hesitated, unsure whether to open the gate for her. "I'm here for the maidens' meeting with the crown prince," Winnie said calmly. The gateman stared at her in disbelief, scanning her appearance from head to toe. After a moment, he frowned and replied, "This meeting is for women, not men." Winnie scoffed and said to the gateman, "Since when did Winnie ever start dressing like a woman?" The moment he heard her name, the gateman's eyes widened in recognition. He didn't know her by face, but he'd heard enough stories to know she was not someone to cross. He wasn't about to end up like the others who'd made that mistake. Quickly, he swung the gate open and even pointed her toward the hall where the other maidens were being kept. Winnie winked at him and strutted in with her usual confidence, only pausing to greet a few palace guards she was friendly with. As she reached the door of the hall, she could already hear the lively chatter and giggles of the maidens from outside. She let out a deep sigh, standing still for a while as she debated whether or not to go in. It wasn't fear that held her back. Far from it. She just knew how easily those girls would try to get under her skin, and ignoring such people had never been her strong suit. But after a moment of thought, she rolled her shoulders, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. The moment the door creaked open, every maiden in the room turned their eyes toward it. Silence fell instantly as they all stared at Winnie in shock and surprise. They knew exactly who she was, and her reputation was anything but sweet. Many of them secretly envied her. Winnie had the wealth and freedom they all dreamed of, yet she didn't seem to value it the way they thought she should. I greet you all, Winnie said, giving a small wave, feeling a bit awkward under their intense, unblinking stares. And then, just like that, they all burst into loud, mocking laughter. Yeah, hilarious, Winnie muttered under her breath as she walked in, ignoring them and heading for an empty seat to mind her business. But just as she sat down, a loud voice cut through the room. Hey, what are you doing here? This isn't a place for stiff, strong men. Our prince isn't gay. Her words sparked another round of laughter, loud and mocking, but Winnie didn't flinch. She ignored them and made her way toward an empty seat, determined to endure whatever nonsense they threw her way. But the maidens clearly weren't done. Just as she was about to sit, another girl stepped forward, Ugma. Proud and poised, she was known for her beauty and her arrogance. As Princess Ifeoma's best friend, she already walked around like royalty. Didn't you hear what was just said? Ugma sneered, blocking Winnie's path. This isn't a place for men. Go home and enjoy your father's money with his male workers, or the village thugs you call best friends. Thugs like you don't belong here. Winnie exhaled sharply, muttering under her breath, I really try hard to avoid this. Then she lifted her head and fixed Ugma with a cold glare. Her voice was low, but firm. Hey, Sisi, stay out of my way while I'm still being peaceful. I promised my father I wouldn't cause trouble today, so take your fake self and move. But Ugma wasn't done. She had a long-standing grudge against Winnie, and with the princess just telling her that the soon-to-be crown prince had accepted to marry her, Ugma already felt like the future queen. And that meant, in her mind, she could do whatever she wanted, even if it meant starting a war. Using her finger, Ugma jabbed repeatedly at Winnie's chest as she spat. Who do you think you are, Winnie? That you can show up at the palace dressed like this? Don't you know it's a sign of disrespect to the king and the entire kingdom? Winnie snorted, slapping her hand away. And who made you the mouthpiece of the king and his entire kingdom? Ugma's expression shifted instantly. Her face flushed with rage. She couldn't let Winnie disrespect her, not in front of the maidens who already worshipped her as the soon-to-be queen. Do you realize you're insulting your future queen? Ugma snapped, voice rising. Prince Obina's betrothed? Winnie burst into laughter, loud and mocking. If Prince Obina chose you as his bride, then he clearly has a thing for fake and overused commodities. Gasps rippled through the room. What insolence! How dare you insult my brother? A sharp voice thundered. All heads turned to the door. There stood Princess Ifeoma, her eyes blazing with fury as she stared daggers at Winnie, every inch of her radiating royal outrage. Welcome, my princess. Greetings, my princess. All the maidens in the room chorused, bowing in fear as Princess Ifeoma walked in, everyone except Winnie. She stood calmly, her eyes fixed on the approaching princess, who wore a furious expression. Is Winnie crazy? How dare she stare directly at the princess without fear? Maybe she thinks this is the village square where she can beat up anyone. I hope the princess teaches her a lesson. Me too. The maidens whispered among themselves in hushed tones. Princess Ifeoma stopped right in front of Winnie, her eyes blazing. Repeat what you just said about my brother. Which part would you like me to repeat? Winnie asked casually. How dare you speak to the princess like that? Ugma cut in, her voice sharp with indignation. Winnie, you really have no manners at all. Winnie let out a tired yawn, casting an indifferent look between Ugma and the princess before speaking. Look, princess. I was minding my business when they attacked me first. My father sent me here, and I don't want to cause any trouble. So why don't you all just leave me alone? I'm not interested in the prince. I'm only here because my parents wanted me to come. I won't bother any of you, and I'd appreciate it if you all returned the favor." She paused, then added with a sarcastic smirk, "And I'm sorry for disobeying the crown prince of the land, who's apparently too lazy to find a wife for himself. I wonder how he plans to rule the kingdom someday." With that, she turned around to leave. "How dare you!" Princess Ifeoma roared. "Who is this village thug? And how on earth did she get into the palace? Hey, stop right there!" she yelled. But Winnie ignored her and kept walking, leaving everyone in the room, Princess included, stunned into silence. "Guards! Guards!" the princess screamed. Ugma leaned in and whispered something into Princess Ifeoma's ear. The princess nodded slowly, a wicked grin spreading across her face. "Oh, I see why you're so full of yourself," she said, stepping closer to where Winnie was seated. "Your father is rich, and you're friends with almost all the thugs in this village. That's why you think you can insult royalty, huh?" She turned and signaled to a few of the maidens. "Get her up." Some of the maidens hesitated. It was Winnie, after all, the girl who avoided trouble, but could beat up boys if she had to. Still, their fear of the princess outweighed their fear of Winnie. About 4 of them stepped forward and dragged her to her feet. Winnie didn't resist. She allowed them to pull her up, silently reminding herself that any trouble she caused might fall back on her mother. She clenched her jaw and stood her ground. "Do you realize I am the princess of this land?" Ifeoma asked, looking her up and down with disdain. "And that my words are law?" But no matter what she said, Winnie didn't respond. She just stared blankly at the princess, clearly bored, as if she couldn't wait to leave the room. Princess Ifeoma's smile twisted into something crueler. "I see why you're acting all high and mighty, because your mother never had another child. I heard she gave the rest of the children in her womb to your father for money." Gasps rippled across the room. "Isn't that why he's so rich now, but without a male child?" The princess continued with a mocking sneer. "Ah, maybe they wanted a boy so badly. That's why you dress like one?" Princess Ifeoma's words triggered a ripple of gasps and murmurs among the maidens. But none of them dared to laugh aloud, too afraid of what Winnie might do. Only Ugma seemed genuinely pleased, her eyes dancing with satisfaction as she watched Winnie's expression shift. The words had struck deep. Winnie's face froze, cold as ice. All her life, she had never tolerated anyone speaking ill of her parents. But now, she was trying, really trying, not to cause trouble. Still, silence didn't mean she wouldn't strike back. Letting out a low, cold chuckle, Winnie stepped forward, stopping just inches from the princess. She leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "You're not the only one who hears things, princess. I heard your mother was barren because of all the abortions she had when she was single. Then, when your father had to marry a second wife, she ran to the chief priest, begging for children. Isn't that why you act so unhinged?" "You wench!" Princess Ifeoma shrieked. She dropped her hand fan and shoved Winnie hard to the ground before launching herself at her, striking her across the face. But Winnie didn't fight back. She just lay there, laughing like someone who had lost her mind. The maidens hadn't heard what Winnie whispered, so all they saw was the princess suddenly attacking her. Shocked and confused, some of them stood frozen, while others bolted out of the room to call for help. One of the maidens ran straight to the queen's chambers to raise the alarm, but she met the queen already on her way toward the hall, walking alongside the king. My queen! There's trouble!" she cried breathlessly. The king and his first wife, Queen Izina, a stunning, fair-skinned woman in her late 50s, both paused, momentarily stunned by the outburst. They turned to the maiden. their expressions filled with concern. "What's chasing you, my daughter?" the king asked, his deep voice calm but curious. He was an elderly man in his early 60s, known for his composed presence. At the sound of his voice, the maiden finally registered that the king was there too. She quickly dropped to her knees in respect. "Greetings, your majesty." "Get up and speak. What's the matter?" Queen Ezine urged, her tone sharp with urgency. "My queen, my king," the maiden stammered. "Princess Ifeoma and Winnie are fighting." "What?" both the king and queen exclaimed at once. "Who dares to lay a hand on my daughter?" the queen thundered, her voice laced with fury. The maiden trembled slightly under the weight of her anger. It's Winnie," she replied in a timid voice. "Winnie?" the king repeated, clearly puzzled. "Who is Winnie, and what caused the fight?" He was stunned. He knew his youngest daughter very well. Bossy, yes, but never violent. So who was this maiden bold enough to challenge the princess? "Let's go there, now," Queen Ezine said sharply, cutting off the maiden before she could speak further. She turned swiftly and led the way to the hall, with the king and the maiden following close behind. By the time they arrived, chaos had already erupted. The maidens were struggling to break up the fight, but Princess Ifeoma refused to be restrained. She was still on top of Winnie, relentlessly striking her face. Blood now trickled from Winnie's nose and lips, yet she didn't lift a hand to defend herself. She simply lay there, still and quiet. But when Princess Ifeoma finally grew tired and made to rise from her, Winnie slowly lifted her head, and with all the strength she had, struck the princess hard on the side of her head. Princess Ifeoma collapsed instantly, losing consciousness. That was the exact moment the king and Queen Ezine entered the hall. A simultaneous scream escaped their lips. "Ifeoma! My baby! Ifeoma!" the queen cried, rushing to her daughter's side. She dropped to her knees and shook her gently, panic etched into her face. But the princess didn't stir, her eyes remained shut. Uproar broke out across the hall. "Guards! Guards!" the king roared. Within moments, 3 palace guards appeared. The king, filled with rage, pointed furiously at Winnie. "Lock this maiden in the palace prison! Immediately! How dare she lay a hand on my daughter?" The guards recognized Winnie, but the king's order was absolute. Without hesitation, they dragged her, bruised and bleeding, out of the hall and toward the palace prison. As Queen Ezine and a few palace maids, including Ugma, carefully lifted Princess Ifeoma, the rest of the maidens stood frozen, restless, and full of unease. They had anticipated this day for so long, hoping for favor or selection, only for Winnie to ruin everything. The king, about to follow his wife, paused and turned to address them. "Maidens of our land," he said sternly, "today's meeting is postponed. Go and wait for the next date." "Yes, your majesty," they chorused with a bow. Though frustrated and disappointed, none dared to disobey. One by one, they began to leave the hall. Prince Obina was completely unaware of the chaos unfolding in the palace. At that moment, he was in his chambers, dressing up for the maiden selection ceremony. Though he had no interest in attending, he felt obligated to honor his parents' wishes, especially his ever-worried mother. After adjusting his robes and checking himself one last time in the mirror, satisfied with his appearance, he was about to step out when his personal bodyguard burst in, his face dark with urgency. "My prince, there's trouble," the guard announced. Prince Obina raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" "The ceremony has been cancelled by the king," the guard replied. "Really?" Prince Obina's face lit up with surprise and relief. "So I don't have to meet those ladies anymore, right?" The guard nodded. "Yes, it's been cancelled." The prince let out a deep sigh of relief and turned back into his room. The guard followed closely behind, continuing his report, even though the prince hadn't asked why the ceremony was called off. Apparently, Princess Ifeoma got into a fight with one of the maidens. Her name is Winnie. The maiden struck the princess on the head and she fainted. Prince Obinna froze mid-step. Slowly, he turned to face his god, eyes wide with disbelief. "What did you just say? My sister did what?" "She had a fight with a maiden who hit her on the head, and she fainted," the god repeated, word for word. Prince Obinna stood still, taking a moment to digest what he'd just heard. The thought of his sister, Princess Ifeoma, physically fighting a maiden instead of simply punishing her was absurd. It made him curious. What kind of maiden would have the boldness to challenge the princess of Umuneke Kingdom without fear? "What did she hit my sister with? And what kind of maiden is that? Why were they even fighting?" he asked, his brows furrowed in disbelief. The bodyguard hesitated, a bit taken aback by the prince's line of questioning. "Shouldn't your priority be checking on the princess? Shouldn't you make sure she's all right?" Prince Obinna let out a quiet chuckle and sat down on the edge of his bed. "Right now, her room is probably swarming with people. I'd rather hear the full gist of what happened first. So, out with it." The guard nodded. "All right, the maiden's name is Winnie, but honestly, I find it strange calling her a maiden," he added with a short laugh. "Why is that?" Prince Obinna asked, his curiosity now fully piqued. "Because she doesn't have any feminine traits at all," the guard replied, shaking his head in amusement. "Her father is Mazi Daik, the richest man in the village. His house is the biggest after the palace, and I dare say they have more workers than we do in this palace." The prince raised an eyebrow, listening intently as the guard continued. "From what I gathered, it started when Ugonma, Princess Ifeoma's best friend, bragged to the other maidens that she's your bride-to-be and ordered Winnie to show her some respect. Winnie replied that if that's true, then the prince must have a knack for fake commodities. It was at that moment Princess Ifeoma overheard everything and, well, the fight started. But from what I heard, the princess struck first. When she finally stopped, Winnie headbutted her, and that's when the princess fainted." The guard finished and waited, expecting the prince to be angry. But to his surprise, Prince Obinna was smiling. "I really thought there were no interesting maidens in this village," Prince Obinna muttered, clearly amused. "Winnie, huh? Eh? My prince, did you say something?" the guard asked, confused. "Where's the maiden now?" the prince asked instead, already rising to retrieve his medical kit. Seeing this, the guard assumed he was finally going to check on his sister. "The king ordered her to be locked in the palace prison," he said. "Let's go," Prince Obinna said, walking toward the door. "To the princess's chambers?" the guard asked, following behind. But what he heard next left him speechless. "To the palace prison?" the prince replied. "To the palace prison?" The guard froze for a second. He blinked once, then again. No matter how hard he tried to make sense of it, he still couldn't understand why the prince would be heading to the prison instead of visiting his unconscious sister. "My prince, why are we going there?" he called out. But Prince Obinna gave no reply, his pace steady as he moved ahead. The guard had no choice but to rush after him, trailing behind in confusion. Meanwhile, in another part of the village, Mazi Daik and his wife, Akuna, were preparing to head out to their shops. One of Mazi Daik's containers had just arrived from the city, and he was eager to supervise the unloading himself. Their driver had already started the car when a young maid, Akuna's secret informant assigned to monitor their daughter's movements, came running into the compound, waving frantically. She rushed in front of the car, forcing the driver to hit the brakes abruptly. Alarmed, Mazi Daik and Akuna quickly stepped out of the vehicle. Amaka, what is the problem? Why are you panting so heavily this morning, like someone is chasing you? Akuna asked in confusion. Amaka, breathing heavily, began her report. Ma'am, there's big trouble in the palace. Without waiting for her to finish, Mazidike sighed in frustration. I knew it! I knew sending that girl to the palace was a huge mistake. Who knows what she's done this time? I swear, I'll make sure she spends a month in jail this time around. As soon as he finished speaking, Akuna glared at him sharply. Naanyi, you can't even wait to hear the whole story, and you're already blaming my daughter? What kind of father are you? Do I need to hear more before I know she's at fault? Mazidike retorted, frowning. Amaka cleared her throat before continuing. Actually, Mazi, Winnie isn't at fault this time. Even I think the princess went too far. What does the princess have to do with this? Don't tell me she fought with the princess. Woman, look at your daughter. Mazidike asked angrily, staring at his wife. Naanyi, if you won't keep quiet and listen to what happened, then go to the shop without me. I'll go to the palace and bring back my daughter, Akuna warned sternly, and Mazidike, though a strict man, fell silent. Amaka continued, taking a deep breath. The princess and the other maidens were taunting Winnie because of her outfit, but she didn't retaliate until the princess made a nasty comment about... Not knowing how to say the vile words, Amaka paused momentarily. Comment about what? Speak quickly, Akuna urged her, anxious to know. She made a comment about you, ma'am, Amaka said quietly. She said Winnie was acting proud because she's your only child, that you gave all the remaining children in your womb to your husband for money rituals. That's why your family is rich. That's what the princess said. Amaka finished her words in a calm voice, but the weight of her statement hung heavily in the air. For a few long seconds, both Mazidike and his wife were silent, stunned. Where is my daughter now? Mazidike finally asked, breaking the silence. She's been locked up in the palace prison, Amaka replied softly, her voice weary from relaying the news. Mazidike turned to look at his wife, whose eyes were already glistening with tears. He clenched his fists, fighting back the storm of emotions threatening to escape. He knew how hard they had tried to have another child after Winnie, and how much pain Akuna had endured in the process. He remembered the countless medicines she had taken just to conceive again, none of which worked. He was the one who eventually begged her to stop, telling her that having Winnie was enough for him. Though he often complained about the trouble their daughter caused, deep down, he was grateful. Grateful that it was his daughter doing the beating, not the one being beaten. But he was never ready to let either his wife or daughter know how deeply he cherished them. Gather our boys, Mazidike said to the driver firmly. We're going to the palace. Then he slowly turned to his wife and gently held her in his arms. We're going to get justice for our daughter, Mazidike assured his wife as he led her into the vehicle. Prince Obina stood silently at the prison door, his gaze fixed on the young lady inside. She sat with her back against the wall, legs stretched out, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Her hair was cut low, and she wore no makeup or fancy attire. Nothing about her appearance screamed royalty or elegance. She wasn't particularly beautiful, at least not in the usual sense, just ordinary. Yet there was something about her, something different. Her expression was calm, cold, and oddly lazy. There was a trace of defiance in her gaze, even in silence, and despite the bruises on her face, she didn't look defeated. In fact, she looked restful, like someone who had made peace with whatever chaos she had caused. Prince Obina tilted his head slightly, intrigued more than ever. If you've seen enough, you can go ahead and tell me why you're here, Winnie muttered, finally tearing her eyes away from the ceiling and fixing them on the stranger standing at the door. The moment their eyes met, she was taken aback for a second. He was striking, almost too perfect. She stared at him for a moment longer, then noticed the faint resemblance he shared with Princess Ifeoma. A random guess formed in her mind. "Are you here to avenge your sister, my prince?" she asked, with a faint, knowing smile. Prince Obina let out a soft chuckle and stepped inside the prison cell, medical kit in hand. "Actually, I'm here to do the opposite," he replied, crouching down in front of her to inspect her injuries more closely. There was a nasty gash along her neck, a torn patch of skin on her cheek, and several scratch marks on her arms. "Ah, were you attacked by a wild dog or something? What's up with all these bites?" he muttered, cracking a half-hearted joke as he opened the kit. Winnie raised a brow, clearly surprised by his words, but still responded with a smirk. "I was bitten by a royal dog." They both chuckled softly at the joke, but Winnie winced almost immediately from the pain that followed. Their laughter faded, replaced by a brief moment of silence as they looked at each other. Then Prince Obina looked away and focused on his medical kit, pulling out some cotton wool and sanitizer. "You're really here to treat your father's prisoner?" Winnie asked, her voice laced with disbelief. She still couldn't understand why a prince would bother tending to her wounds. "I'm a doctor, Winnie. It's my job to treat people," he replied gently. "Now brace yourself. This will sting a little." He dabbed the spirit on her wound, and Winnie hissed in pain. "Are you going to treat all the injured prisoners in here too?" she asked, once the burning sensation eased. "No," he said simply. "I'm treating only you." He placed a small plaster on her hand, then leaned in to sanitize the cut on her face, his fingers brushing close to her lips. His eyes unintentionally dropped to her mouth, soft, small, and pink. He found himself staring longer than he should have, until her soft sound of pain snapped him out of it. He quickly resumed tending to her wounds. "Did you know I'm the one who made your sister faint?" Winnie asked suddenly, her voice calm but probing, as if trying to read his thoughts. "Yep, I heard. You knocked her out with just one kick," Prince Obina replied casually. Winnie blinked in surprise. "Did you also hear that I insulted you?" "Yep," he said again, still calm. "You said I have a knack for fake commodities." Winnie was momentarily speechless. "If you knew all that, then why are you treating me?" Prince Obina didn't answer immediately. He carefully finished the last part of her treatment, then raised his brows at her. "Because I wanted to prove you wrong." She narrowed her eyes, confused. "Prove me wrong about what?" He stared at her for a few seconds before replying, his voice quiet, but layered with meaning. "I've never had a knack for fake commodities. I only go for the real ones, and I know one when I see it." Winnie opened her mouth to speak again, but he cut in before she could ask the next question. "It's all done. Your parents should be here shortly, and I'd rather not have them fall out with the king when they see their precious daughter's face." When he noticed her surprised expression, he chuckled lightly and added, "Winnie, your parents aren't just anybody, and you're their only child. I figured they'd be furious that you're in here, so I decided to ease their anger a little." With that, he bent to gather his medical kit. "You're here for eye service then," Winnie said calmly. Prince Obina chuckled. "Well, you could put it that way. See you around, Winnie." He winked at her and walked away, leaving Winnie speechless and more confused than ever. Meanwhile, the king was seated in his obi with his elders when Mazi Dike arrived with a full show of presents. 3 cars drove into the palace compound, each filled with men, and it felt like they were preparing for war. Mazi Dike stepped out, his wife Akuna by his side. Together, they walked into the king's obi, their expressions tense and unreadable. The elders looked on, stunned by the sudden intrusion. They greeted the king and the council, but the air was heavy with unspoken anger. "Mazi Dike, I was about to send for you," the king said calmly. "I'm glad you're here. Please take a seat." Mazi Dike shook his head firmly. "Your Majesty, I didn't come here for a conversation. Where is my daughter? I heard you locked her up in the palace prison. For what reason? Is my daughter a criminal?" "Mazi Dike, is that why you stormed into my palace with a convoy of men, as if we're preparing for war?" the king asked, his tone calm, but laced with confusion. "Your Majesty," Mazi Dike replied firmly, "I just hope nothing has happened to my daughter. Because if it has, then you will truly see what war looks like." "Mazi Dike, threatening the king is no way to solve this problem," one of the king's elders spoke up. "Besides, your daughter fought with the princess of our land, and she fainted," he added, and another elder quickly supported his words. "You're right, my fellow elder. Everyone knows that Winnie, your daughter, is the biggest troublemaker we have in this village. Also, we have never seen the princess fight anyone before. So, Mazi Dike, instead of making threats, you should be apologizing to the king." Their words infuriated Akuna so much that she could no longer hold back. She glared at both elders, her anger barely contained. "Wow, I can't believe you old men," she snapped. "You are now calling my daughter a troublemaker, right? Because she fought with the princess, she's automatically at fault? Well, let me remind you, my daughter is also a princess in my house. Winnie has never fought anyone without reason, and from what I heard, it was the princess who started it. She hit her first." Mazi Dike held his wife tightly and signaled for his boys to draw closer. When they obeyed, a ripple of fear swept through the gathering. Even the king shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Akuna, you are a woman, and women are not supposed to speak in the council of elders," another elder, his hair completely white, said sternly. "If you claim your daughter is innocent, then show us proof." The king cleared his throat loudly, deciding it was best to settle the matter peacefully. In truth, he hadn't realized that the maiden he had ordered to be locked up was Mazi Dike's daughter. Otherwise, he would have handled things very differently. Mazi Dike was one of the most influential men in the village, and he was the palace's main supplier of foodstuffs and beverages at highly discounted prices. The king knew better than to offend such a valuable ally. "Mazi Dike, Akuna," the king spoke calmly. "I was unaware that the maiden involved was your daughter. Please, ask your men to withdraw. Let's settle this matter like adults." "I need to see my daughter first," Mazi Dike said stubbornly, his voice firm. The king nodded in agreement. "Very well then. Guards," the king commanded sharply. A man dressed in a black outfit quickly entered the chamber. "You sent for me, my king," he said, bowing slightly. "Yes, go and bring the maiden who fought with the princess," the king instructed firmly. "Yes, my king," the guard replied respectfully before hurrying out. Meanwhile, Princess Ifeoma had already regained consciousness. The moment she saw her mother, brother, and best friend by her side, she immediately began to sob, fake tears rolling down her cheeks in an attempt to draw more sympathy. "My baby, are you all right?" Queen Ezina asked tenderly, pulling her into a comforting hug. "Mother, you must get justice for me," Princess Ifeoma cried dramatically. "That wench insulted you!" "What do you mean she insulted me?" Queen Ezina asked, concern flashing across her face. Princess Ifeoma untangled herself from her mother's embrace and added, "Mother, you know I have never fought anyone before, and I wouldn't start now," Princess Ifeoma said, her voice trembling. But that girl said terrible things about you, and I couldn't hold back. What did she say? Tell me, Queen Ezine urged, her tone sharp with anger. Princess Efeoma sniffled and, in a small voice, replied, She called you barren and wicked, mother. She said the gods didn't give you children because of your wickedness, and that's why you had to seek children from the chief priest after your co-wife bore 2 sons while you had none. She even said, I behaved like an abnormal person. What nonsense! Queen Ezine roared in fury, her voice echoing through the chamber. Everyone in the room was burning with anger, except Prince Obina, who was struggling to hold back his laughter. What's so funny? Someone calling your mother barren. Is that funny to you? Princess Ifeoma snapped at her brother, glaring. Prince Obina shrugged casually. It's not funny, he said. But it's called self-defense. Ifeoma, you insulted her family first, so why can't you take back what you gave? Will you shut up? Queen Ezine shouted at her son, her eyes blazing with fury. You see that maiden? I will make sure she never sees the light of day again. Queen Ezine fumed. Just as she finished speaking, one of the palace maids, the one assigned to attend to the queen, rushed into the room and leaned in to whisper something in her ear. The king has released the maiden, my queen, the maid said quietly. She's being taken to the council of elders in the king's obi. Are you telling me the truth? Queen Ezine asked sharply. The maid quickly nodded. This news only enraged the queen further. She stood up abruptly and stormed out towards the king's obi, her heavy gown sweeping behind her. Prince Obina casually followed after her, unable to resist the unfolding drama. The palace had been so dull since his return, and he wasn't about to miss this. Meanwhile, as soon as Winnie saw her father's squad waiting outside, she was taken aback. She hadn't truly believed that her father cared enough to come for her. After all, he always said he would leave her to rot if she ever brought trouble to their doorstep. The realization touched her deeply. When the guard led her into the king's obi, Winnie decided to play a little dramatic game. Mother! Father! Look at what the princess did to your favorite daughter! She cried loudly, throwing herself into an emotional fit. They even locked me up in a dark prison without food or water. She burst into loud sobs, shocking everyone present, including the guard who had escorted her. He looked at her in disbelief, remembering how he had found Winnie earlier, comfortably playing a card game with the palace prisoners, laughing as though she were on holiday. And now here she was, crying as if she had been starved for days, when it had barely been an hour. Akuna, knowing her daughter's playful nature, wasn't fooled. But seeing the few bandages plastered across Winnie's beautiful face was enough to ignite her fury anew. My daughter, come to Mummy, she said, opening her arms wide. Winnie hurried into her mother's embrace and whispered, My sweet Mummy, you really came for me. You stupid girl, why did you allow them to put so many marks on your face? How will you get married with this ugly face? Her mother whispered sharply. Mother, that's so mean. But I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Winnie whispered back, hugging her tightly. Keep dreaming. I need my grandchildren, Akuna muttered, trying to hide the concern in her voice. Everyone in the king's obi watched the mother and daughter whispering back and forth, unsure whether to be amused or touched. Mazi Dyke stood there, speechless, torn between feeling angry that his daughter had been struck so badly and baffled by their casual conversation. The king cleared his throat loudly to regain control of the room. At the sound, Winnie slowly untangled herself from her mother's embrace. She straightened up, greeted her father respectfully, and then turned to greet the king with a small, polite bow. Your Majesty, can you see the injury your daughter inflicted on my daughter's face? Maisie Dyke began angrily. My daughter had a very normal face, like every other girl. If her face becomes disfigured, who will marry her? Winnie twitched her lips slightly at her father's words, unsure whether he was speaking up for her or mocking her instead. I would marry her. A deep voice echoed through the Obi, drawing everyone's attention. They were all stunned to see that it was Prince Arinzi. He had heard that Prince Obina and the Queen were heading toward the King's Obi, and he had rushed there ahead of them. Greetings, Father. Greetings, my elders. And greetings to my future in-laws, he said respectfully, bowing slightly to each of them before his eyes settled warmly on the still surprised Winnie. She's pretty enough for me, he added with a soft smile. I'm already too handsome. I don't need a woman who's prettier than me. I just need one who's bold. Winnie blinked in surprise, feeling slightly awkward in the presence of the first prince of the land. This was the first time she was seeing him in person, and he appeared not only handsome but also mysterious. At least she felt free around Prince Obina. But this prince she was now looking at seemed deep, serious, and a little dangerous. My prince, please stop joking around, she said with a light chuckle. There's a serious issue at hand. If you say so, my lady, Prince Arinzi replied with a small smirk. Forgive me, I can't offer you the queenship. That belongs to my brother's bride. But I promise you this, I would still treat you like a queen. Of course, that would only be possible if you give me the chance, he said, bowing slightly to her before going to take his seat. Not knowing what to say, Winnie quickly shifted behind her mother, hiding like a little child. Mother, protect me, she whispered. Akuna only smiled warmly, though she stared deeply at Prince Arinzi, wondering what could be his true reason for wanting her daughter. Just as everyone was still processing Prince Arinzi's words, Queen Ezine suddenly appeared, accompanied by Prince Obina. Where is that wench? Guards, send this stupid girl back to the prison immediately, she ordered, pointing furiously at Winnie, who was still hiding behind her mother. My queen, what are you doing in the Council of Elders? The king asked with a frown, already confused and displeased by her outburst. Didn't you hear that I was the one who ordered her release? Ignoring the fact that she was in the Council of Elders, Queen Ezine replied sharply, Your Majesty, you don't know what this maiden said about me. She insulted me, the queen of this land, and the punishment for such disrespect is death. Her words caused an uproar in the palace. Akuna scoffed lightly. Excuse me, Your Highness. Whose daughter are you pairing with the word death? Is it my daughter or someone else? Queen Ezine turned sharply toward Akuna and sneered. Your daughter will rot in jail for the rest of her life. You must be a stupid woman, Ezine. No, you must be mad. In fact, you must be crazy. Is it your daughter who would rot in prison for the rest of her life? Oh, because you wear that crown on your head, you think you can control everyone's life? Ha! You must be dreaming! Akuna's voice was sharp with fury. I, Akuna, also have connections. I didn't just follow my husband around in his business for nothing. I have connections far beyond this tiny village. Just try and lay a hand on my daughter, and watch me invite the commissioner of police here. Both you and your daughter will end up locked up for speaking ill of me. Akuna finished in one breath, and when she was done, Winnie clapped for her mother, her eyes wide with admiration. Wow, my mother is really awesome. She turned to her father and gave him a thumbs up. Daddy, where did you find such an awesome woman to marry? You really need to treat her well, because you're lucky. You're right, my daughter. I'm so lucky, Mazi Dyke agreed. A rare moment of agreement between father and daughter. How dare you? Queen Ezine began. But her husband immediately interrupted her in an annoyed voice. That is enough, my queen, the king's voice thundered. This is my Obi, and no women are allowed in here, If you are a woman, leave this place immediately. Anyone who disobeys me will be locked up, no matter who they are." Queen Ezina opened her mouth to argue, but seeing her husband this angry made her hesitate. Though she was reluctant, she knew there was no point in staying. With a sharp glare, she turned to leave. Akuna took her daughter by the hand, bowed respectfully, and followed her out. Prince Obina was quietly watching everything unfold, clearly amused. He could see exactly where Winnie had gotten her fiery personality from, and for a moment, he couldn't help but envy Mazi Dyke, who had to live with two dramatic women in his life. "I bet his life is never boring," he muttered to himself before taking his seat as the crown prince of the land. Unsure of what to say next, Mazi Dyke finally sat down. "Women are troublesome, but life would be boring without them." The king made a light-hearted joke as he finally calmed down, causing everyone to laugh. They couldn't deny it. The show had been quite entertaining. "So, this problem is between two young girls. My youngest daughter is 20 years old, and I assume that's around the same age as your daughter, Mazi Dyke?" the king asked. Mazi Dyke nodded. "You're right, Your Majesty. That's their age. Most of us fought more than they have at that age, and now we're all best friends, aren't we?" the king asked again, and they all nodded in agreement. "So, let's not let a disagreement between us arise just because of these children," the king continued. "Who knows? They might even become best friends in the future. And Mazi Dyke, I apologize for only having your daughter locked up. It seems both of them were injured, and both need discipline. Here's my proposal. You take your daughter home and discipline her, while I will also discipline my daughter." And just like that, the meeting came to an end, and the elders went back to their homes, leaving only the king and his two sons in the Obi. "Father, Prince Obina, I want to make an announcement in your presence," Prince Arinzi began, with a calm smile. The father nodded, giving him a signal to proceed. "Father, it's about what I said earlier. I want to take that maiden as my bride, and I'm serious about it." Prince Obina's expression darkened slightly at the news. He had already taken an interest in Winnie, and now his brother was making his intentions known toward her. The king fell silent for a while. The truth was, he didn't hate the girl, but he didn't like her either. She wasn't well-mannered and wasn't the type of person he envisioned as a daughter-in-law. "Why her?" the king asked, his gaze fixed on his son. "There are so many beautiful and respectable maidens in this village." Prince Arinze smiled, catching his brother's expression before answering. "Because she's interesting. Other maidens are boring." "No, I won't accept that maiden as a daughter-in-law," the king bluntly refused. "I only allowed her to go scot-free after harming my daughter, the princess, because of her father's affluence, and because the food and beverages we've been using in this palace have been supplied by him for a long time. But I won't accept that wild child as my daughter-in-law. Both of you should take note. If you have any fantasies about her, better kill them off," the king warned before standing up to leave. Prince Obina and Prince Arinzi remained seated, even after their father had left. "What are you trying to do, brother?" Prince Obina asked, breaking the silence. "What do you mean, baby brother?" "I'm talking about Winnie. Why are you interested in her? She's not your type of girl. You've always loved pretty girls." Hearing his words, Prince Arinzi began to laugh. After a while, he nodded. "You know me too well, baby brother. She's not my type, but over time, my type has changed. You like her, don't you?" Prince Obina didn't say a word, but his anger was clearly visible. "I was right, you like her," Prince Arinze added, staring at his brother's expression. "But sadly, you can't have everything you want, baby brother. You can have the throne, and I will have Winnie." After saying that, he stood up and left, laughing. Prince Obina sat there, his eyes closed, trying desperately to calm his raging emotions. He had just met this lady, so why was he already feeling so angry that another man wanted her? "Who the hell are you, Winnie?" he muttered silently. "I heard you fought with the princess at the palace last week. Wow, you've got some guts, Winnie," EBUBE, one of her father's workers, said, as Winnie came to help them offload foodstuffs one morning. Winnie took the carton of noodles from him and passed it to the next person before replying casually, "I only let her beat me up because she's royalty. If I had really fought back, I don't think she would have survived it." EBUBE chuckled at her response and handed her another carton. "Is that why you didn't attend today's maiden selection? Because you were afraid she might attack you again?" Winnie snorted. "Afraid? That princess is too dumb and weak for me. I didn't go because my dad finally realized that sending me there was a mistake. Honestly, I wish I had never stepped foot in that palace. Maybe then I wouldn't have met them." She shuddered at the memory of the way Prince Arinzi had looked at her that day at the palace. "Met who? The princes?" EBUBE asked, and she nodded. "I met both of them, and I can tell you that Prince Arinzi is a very mysterious man. I heard he's cool though. Never picks a fight or questions why the second prince gets most of the favor from people," EBUBE said casually, wiping the sweat from his face. Winnie shook her head and replied thoughtfully, "If my guess is right, then Prince Arinzi is more than he appears. That man is dangerous. I can feel it." "Then you prefer Prince Obina? I heard he treated your wound," EBUBE asked with a mischievous smile. He had known Winnie since she was a child and was more like a big brother to her. "Prince Obina isn't bad," she admitted. "But he's not my type either. Honestly, I don't want to have anything to do with anyone from that palace ever again." "So, you don't have any plans of getting married anytime soon?" Winnie raised her brows at him. "I'm too young for marriage. In fact, I have no intention of getting married at all." "Then I'll just have to sell you off at an auction and buy another daughter, one who plans on bringing me a son-in-law," a familiar voice said behind her. Winnie turned and saw her father standing beside her. She chuckled awkwardly and quickly went to hug him. "Father, you wouldn't have the heart to do that, right?" "Try me and see," he replied in a serious tone after acknowledging greetings from his workers. "My sweet mother would never let you," Winnie said sweetly, cuddling up to him. "Besides, I'm such a productive daughter." Maisie Dyke looked at her sweaty face and sighed inwardly, wondering why his only daughter couldn't just act like a proper lady for once. Dress up nicely and stop doing work meant for men. "What are you even doing here? Looking all sweaty like a Christmas goat." "Did I employ you to work for me?" he said, glaring at her. Winnie slowly edged away from him. "Father, I was just helping. You should be happy instead of complaining," Winnie said. "I didn't call you here. Go home. Your mother sent for you. And while you're at it, take a bath and dress like a lady for once, or I'll burn all your male clothes," he warned. Hearing the seriousness in his voice, Winnie knew better than to argue and risk making him even angrier. Instead, she simply said, "Yes, sir. Can I take your car home?" she added with a small grin. Maisie Dyke looked at her for a long moment and said, "Or would you rather walk home looking like that? How do you expect to find a husband dressed like this?" The moment her father mentioned husband, Winnie immediately slipped away, waving goodbye to EBUBE and the other workers. She hopped into her father's car and drove off straight home. "This girl will be the death of me," Maisie Dyke muttered, shaking his head. EBUBE laughed and replied, "Master, Winnie is actually a good girl." "I never said she wasn't. I just wish she would act like a girl for once." "She will. When the time comes, EBUBE said with a smile. How many cartons of noodles were you able to count? Did they send the complete goods? Mazidike asked, immediately switching to business talk. Yes, master. Everything is complete, EBUBE replied. Winnie got home in less than 30 minutes. She jumped out of the car and began calling out loudly, Mama, your sweet daughter is back, and I'm right. Her words trailed off the moment she stepped into the sitting room and saw 3 palace guards sitting on the sofa with her mother. Mother, you have visitors? She asked, starting to walk inside when her mother's voice stopped her. Come back here. They were waiting for you. She stiffened and slowly turned around. For me? She asked, narrowing her eyes. One of the guards stood up and said, Yes, miss. The prince has invited you to the palace for a lunch date. Winnie's eyes widened in surprise. Isn't the prince busy selecting his bride today? We're talking about Prince Arinzi, the second guard added. He gave us this to give to you, the third guard said, standing up and handing a parcel to Winnie. He said it's a gift, and he would love for you to wear it. Winnie slowly took the parcel, staring at it for a moment, then glanced at the guards, who were watching her expectantly. She then looked at her mother, who was busy hand-weaving a sweater, pretending not to notice what was happening. Can I decline? Winnie asked with an awkward smile. Her mother immediately spoke up. Just go. It's only a lunch date. It would be disrespectful to turn down the prince's invitation. Although Winnie really didn't want to go, she wasn't one to disobey her mother. So, with a forced smile, she nodded. Give me a few minutes to freshen up, she said, then walked inside with the parcel in her hands. The prince shouldn't have bothered sending her a dress, Oena said to the palace guards once her daughter was out of earshot. Eh? Oena looked at the guards and smiled. She won't wear it. Her closet is already filled with dresses she hasn't even tried on once. My daughter hates female clothes, she explained. True to her mother's words, Winnie didn't even bother opening the parcel to see what kind of dress had been sent. She simply dropped it on her neatly arranged bed and went into the bathroom to take a bath. Roughly 30 minutes later, Winnie was ready to leave. She was dressed in her favorite white shorts, a white shirt, a pair of sandals, a face cap, and just a touch of lip gloss as her only makeup. Without forgetting the unopened parcel on her bed, she picked it up and headed to the parlor to meet the guards. I'm ready. Let's go, she said. Since her mother had already warned them that she wouldn't wear the dress, the guards weren't too surprised to see her in men's clothing. They simply nodded and stood up, heading for the door, while Winnie followed behind, but not before leaning over to kiss her mother goodbye. Winnie, no causing trouble. Remember, the queen and her daughter aren't happy with you at all, Oena gently reminded her. Okay, Mom, Winnie replied. At the palace, Prince Arinzi's room. I heard you invited that Winnie girl to the palace. Why? Princess Adaizi asked casually, lifting her eyes from her phone to focus on her brother. I want to get to know her, maybe even marry her, Prince Arinzi replied coolly. Adaizi was momentarily taken aback by his answer. She let out a small laugh. No way. Are you kidding me, bro? She's nowhere near your type of girl. Prince Arinzi paused what he was doing on his system and smiled. You're right, but my taste has changed. I'm interested in her. For real? Princess Adaizi raised her brows, still finding it hard to believe. Her brother's exes and current girlfriends were all divas, stunningly beautiful, well-mannered women of class. That was the kind of company he usually kept. So the idea that he would be interested in a village girl, one who hadn't even attended university, was almost laughable to her. Yes, for real, Prince Arinzi replied with a mysterious smile. Princess Adaeze dropped her phone onto the bed and walked toward him. She leaned back against the desk where he was working and said, "I know her parents are wealthy, but it's not like we're lacking money either. So what could your real reason be for wanting to settle with a girl who's so notorious for her bad behavior in this village? Do you think Mother would allow it, especially with how much she wants you to ascend the throne?" Prince Arinzi looked at his sister and smiled again. "Winnie is an interesting girl. You'd like her if you got to know her. And as for the throne, I have my plans." A new idea popped into his head, and he added, "I want you to do something for me." "And what could that be?" Adaze asked curiously. "Send one of your maidens to spread the news that I'm having a lunch date with Winnie. Make sure the word gets to Oena." Not understanding a thing, Princess Adaze furrowed her brows in confusion. "What does your lunch date have to do with Prince Oena?" "Just do as I say, and stop asking so many questions," Prince Arinzi replied, going back to his work. His sister stared at him for a moment, still eager to understand what was going on, but ultimately decided to wait. Suddenly, a knock echoed through the door, followed by the voice of a guard outside. "My prince, your guest has arrived." At that, Prince Arinzi quickly saved his work, shut down his laptop, and stood up. He motioned for his sister to go carry out the task he had given her. All right. But make sure to fill me in later, okay?" she said, pointing a finger at him. "I will," he replied with a nod. Once his sister stepped out of the room, Prince Arinzi opened the door and instructed his guard, "Take her to the garden and serve her some juice. I'll join her in a few minutes. Also, tell the chefs in the kitchen that my guest has arrived so they can start preparing the meal." "Right away, my prince," the guard replied with a slight bow before leaving. "Shall the game begin?" Prince Arinzi muttered with an evil smirk as he headed towards the bathroom to freshen up. "So, what would you do if given the opportunity to become the queen of this land?" Prince Oena asked the maiden seated opposite him, his voice tired and devoid of enthusiasm. She was the 10th maiden he had interviewed today, and they all gave the same rehearsed, predictable responses. He wished the whole process could just end already. He was sick of the pretentiousness. None of them wanted to be themselves. They all simply tried to say what they thought the prince wanted to hear. "My prince, are you hearing me?" the fair-skinned maiden asked sweetly, noticing his blank stare. Yeah. What was your answer again?" "I said, if I become queen, I would do everything possible to support my king, serve my people, and lead with fairness and justice." "What's your hobby?" Prince Oena asked, barely hiding his boredom. "Hobby?" The maiden laughed awkwardly. "What do you mean by hobby?" "I mean the things you love doing. What brings you joy?" "Oh," she laughed again, like she'd finally understood. "I find pleasure in eating and serving my husband well in the other room," she added, blushing furiously. Prince Oena didn't know whether to laugh or yell. He simply stared at her blankly, silently wishing the entire process would come to an end. Just then, his personal bodyguard entered the hall, walked over to the prince, and bent down to whisper in his ear. "Are you serious?" Prince Oena asked, eyes widening slightly. "That's what I heard," the bodyguard whispered back. "Did you confirm it? Or are you just repeating rumors?" the prince asked sharply, glaring at him. The guard cleared his throat and replied quietly, "My prince, it's true. She's here, in the garden." "Good," Prince Oena said as he rose from his seat. "Help me round up this interview." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the hall, leaving both the maiden and his bodyguard staring after him in stunned silence. "My prince!" The bodyguard tried to speak, but Prince Oena was already out of the room. He paused, then slowly turned back to the maiden with an awkward smile. The prince said I should... Machu! The maiden hissed in irritation and stormed out before he could finish. Are you leaving too? He called after her, but she was already gone. Winnie sat comfortably in the palace garden, sipping her juice and nodding gently to the music playing through her earphones. Her eyes were closed, and she seemed completely unaware of her surroundings, lost in the melody. From a distance, Prince Obina watched her quietly. There was something about her presence that drew him in. He found himself stepping closer, one slow footstep at a time, until he was standing right in front of her. Taking a better look, he realized her features weren't exactly stunning. At least, not in the conventional sense. She looked ordinary. And yet, he couldn't explain why he was so eager to see her again, after just one brief encounter. Suddenly, Winnie smiled to herself, still unaware of his presence. That smile lit up her face in a way that caught him off guard. It was radiant and genuine. He felt his own lips curl into a smile, unconsciously mirroring hers. Shaking off his thoughts, he reached out and gently unplugged one of her earphones. Who's... Winnie paused mid-sentence when she opened her eyes and saw who it was. Blinking slowly, she asked, Isn't it Prince Arinzi who invited me here? Why? Prince Obina said with a smile as he took the seat across from her. You sound like you didn't want to see me. To be honest, I didn't want to see any of you princes. In fact, I detest even stepping foot in this palace, Winnie replied with a weary sigh, speaking to him as casually as she would a friend, not like someone addressing royalty. Her bluntness made Prince Obina chuckle. You looked quite comfortable when I saw you just now. Not like someone who detests being here, he said, raising a brow at her. Winnie cleared her throat. Well, I've learned to be comfortable wherever I find myself, even if it's the place I'll be executed. Comfort is my survival tactic. Why? She shrugged. I wouldn't want to give my killers the satisfaction they crave. You can choose to kill me, but I won't beg. I'll die with dignity. Prince Obina poured himself a drink, took a sip, and replied, If you ask me, I'd say that's a selfish act. You only care about yourself, not your parents. Your mother even challenged the queen to save you, and yet you say you wouldn't beg your killers for mercy. Winnie went quiet, reflecting on his words. As much as she hated to admit it, there was a hint of truth in what he said. Well, you're not wrong, she finally said. But tell me, would begging them really save my life? It might. Who knows? Prince Obina replied, fixing his gaze on her. He couldn't understand it. Why was it so easy to talk to her? She wasn't the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, yet she possessed a quiet charm that made him want to keep the conversation going. Noticing how intently he was staring, Winnie shifted uncomfortably and asked, Why are you looking at me like that? Is there something on my face? Why do you keep speaking to me so informally? Are we friends? He asked suddenly. Looking at you, I'd say you're around the same age as my sister. She just turned 20 this year. Winnie rolled her eyes. All my life, I've never spoken to people formally. Not even my parents, if you must know. Besides, you don't strike me as the kind of person who enjoys all that stiff formal talk. Isn't it boring? Prince Obina was about to respond when he noticed his brother approaching from a distance. He sighed inwardly, knowing he had to leave, even though he didn't want to. Winnie, if I send you an invite, would you honor it? The question caught Winnie off guard. For a moment, she could have sworn her heart skipped a beat. I don't like coming to the palace, she found herself saying. Prince Obina smiled. It won't be at the palace. My guard will send you the location. What are you doing with my guest, baby brother? Prince Arinzi asked calmly, as he approached with a faint smile. I thought I could keep her company since you weren't here, Prince Obina replied, rising to his feet. But his brother's next words made him pause. That's unlike you, baby brother. You've never taken an interest in my women. Prince Obina turned to look at Winnie, holding her gaze for a few seconds longer than necessary. Well, I might be interested in this one, he said, flashing her a charming smile before walking away. As soon as he said it, Winnie swallowed hard. Her heart skipped again. She looked from Prince Obina to Prince Arinzi, and for a moment, the tension between them felt like a volcano waiting to erupt. Prince Arinzi's expression shifted slightly, but it only lasted a moment before returning to its calm state. Sorry for keeping you waiting. I hope you haven't been here too long? He asked, taking his seat. It's fine, sir. I wasn't bored anyway. He nodded. My baby brother has always been a lively person, even as a child. We've always gotten along well. Are you sure? Because it feels like there's some serious tension between you two. Then again, I never had siblings, so I wouldn't know if that's normal. Prince Arinze laughed. You're such an interesting person, Winnie. I hope you're hungry. I asked the chef to prepare plenty of food just for you. Hearing his words, she chuckled awkwardly. Sir, I don't really eat much. And when I visit a place I don't like, I usually lose my appetite. The food just doesn't go down. Don't worry, Prince Arinzi said with a reassuring smile. You'll like the food. Our chef cooks excellently well. He began to wonder if he'd made a mistake by ordering so much. But what happened next left him speechless. A few minutes later, his hand froze midair, his wine glass suspended as he watched the young lady eat heartily in front of him. The way she kept stuffing food into her mouth and nodding happily like a little child amused him to no end. If he didn't know who her parents were, he might have mistaken her for someone who hadn't eaten in days. He simply smiled and took a sip of his wine as he continued watching her. Within 30 minutes, the entire meal was gone, nothing left but empty plates. Prince Arinzi slowly handed her a glass of water. Winnie took it and drank every last drop. It wasn't until she was done that she realized she'd completely cleared the table, after claiming she couldn't eat in unfamiliar places. You eat well for someone who can't stomach food in a place she doesn't like, Prince Arinzi said with a knowing smile. Slightly embarrassed, she smiled back. The food was so delicious. I couldn't help myself. Prince Arinzi laughed and nodded. I understand completely. Sometimes when I have no appetite and our chef brings out one of his specialties, I find myself clearing the whole plate too, just like you did. Winnie didn't know whether Prince Arinzi was mocking her or just trying to be funny, so she simply smiled. But even while smiling, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling she always got around him. There was something mysterious about him, something that made her feel unsettled. Winnie, I really appreciate you coming, he said, his tone calm but unreadable. As much as I'd love to keep chatting with you, I have to respect boundaries and send you back. I only invited you for lunch, and lunch is over. So, would you prefer walking home, or should my driver take you? His question caught Winnie off guard. She had expected him to bring up marriage again, just like he did the other day. Since he didn't, she felt oddly disappointed. If he had, she would have used the opportunity to turn him down properly. But now, she didn't know what to make of it. Winnie, he called again, clearing his throat. I'll walk home, sir. After eating that much, walking feels like the right thing to do. Prince Arinzi shrugged casually. All right, I thought you'd say that. See you next time. Next time? Winnie raised a brow at him. He smiled. Yes, next time. Don't worry, I don't bite. I wish I could believe that, she muttered under her breath. Did you say something? She quickly shook her head. No, sir. I'll be leaving now. She stood, gave a small respectful bow, and walked away. Prince Arinzi watched her go, a faint, unreadable smile playing on his lips. If his instincts were right, then his brother, Prince Obina, had truly taken a liking to this village girl. And honestly, he wasn't surprised. His brother had always hated boring people. He was drawn to things, or people, that intrigued him. That was exactly why he insisted on studying abroad. Because, according to him, schooling in Nigeria is boring. Unlike him, growing up, Prince Arinzi was barely treated like a prince. He had to work tirelessly to prove himself, to earn respect and recognition. It wasn't until he demonstrated his capability that their father finally acknowledged him by offering him a position in the royal company. Yet, the moment Prince Obina returned from overseas, he was immediately handed the reins, even though he hadn't studied anything business-related. Arinzi's smile deepened. "Brother," he murmured to himself, "I'm taking this one from you. But first, I have a few plans for her." Walking happily toward the palace gate, Winnie silently prayed not to run into any of the princesses. She was far too tired to deal with anyone's trouble. As she neared the gate and saw no sign of them, her heart lifted with relief. She let out a heavy sigh, glad she'd made it through. But just as she was about to step out, a guard's voice rang out from afar. "Don't open the gate for her!" Winnie froze. Unease crept in. Not that she was afraid of anyone, but the truth was, she had no desire to stir trouble with the royal family. She turned slowly, only to see 4 guards approaching with stern, unreadable expressions. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked cautiously. "The queen wants to see you," one of the guards answered sharply, then signaled to the others. "Take her, now." Without another word, 2 guards seized her arms and led her away. Winnie didn't struggle. She didn't speak. She simply allowed them to escort her, knowing any resistance could worsen the situation. She'd heard the stories. Queen Ezina was ruthless, unforgiving. And after the way her mother had spoken to the queen the other day, Winnie doubted there would be mercy. When they arrived at the queen's chambers, Queen Ezine raised her hand and spoke coolly. "You may leave us." "Yes, Your Highness," the guards said in unison, bowed and exited, leaving Winnie alone in the lavish room. Queen Ezine sat regally with her legs crossed, sipping tea in slow, deliberate movements. A young maid stood behind her, gently massaging her shoulders. The air was heavy, the silence suffocating. Winnie stood quietly to one side, unsure of what to say, her nerves prickling under the queen's cold gaze. "Flora," Queen Ezine said calmly, not even lifting her gaze from her tea. "Slap her." Without hesitation, the maid stopped massaging, walked straight to Winnie, and delivered a heavy slap across her face. Winnie didn't flinch. She didn't cry out. She simply stood there, unmoving, her cheeks stinging, her eyes locked on the queen. "Another one!" At the queen's command, Flora landed another heavy slap on Winnie's face. This one stung more than the last, but still, Winnie didn't flinch or utter a word. Another one. And so it continued. By the time the 5th slap struck her, her lips had begun to bleed, yet she remained silent, still, calm, her gaze fixed blankly on the queen. "A tough one, huh?" Queen Ezine smirked, then waved at the maid to leave. Flora bowed and exited without a word. "Do you know why I slapped you?" the queen asked coldly. For the first time, Winnie responded, not with words, but with a small, knowing smile. "For telling the truth?" "What?" the queen frowned. "I mean," Winnie said with a shrug, "you slapped me while the injury your daughter gave me still hasn't healed. You and your daughter must have something personal against this ordinary face of mine." Queen Ezina's expression darkened. "Do you know who you're speaking to?" No matter how wealthy your parents may be, I can crush you without lifting a single finger." "I know, Your Majesty," Winnie replied calmly. "That's why I've been trying hard to stay away. I only came to the palace today because Prince Arinzi invited me, not because I wanted to." The queen chuckled bitterly and nodded. "Fine, I'll let you off today. But hear me clearly. If you ever cross me, my daughter, or my son again, if I ever see or hear that you've gone near any of them—" She leaned forward slightly, her voice sharp and low. "You won't like what I'll do to you. Have I made myself clear?" "Yes, Your Majesty. You may leave." She waved a dismissive hand. Winnie gave a small bow and walked out without another word. Outside, a palace guard, one of the few people she considered a friend, saw her and gasped. "Wow, look at your face," he exclaimed. "Why did you even provoke the queen like that? You know she's not one to forgive easily." Winnie sighed and shrugged. "I don't know. It wasn't intentional. Trouble just seems to find me no matter where I go. All I can do is ignore it, or embrace it." He frowned. "But are you going home like this? Won't your mother be worried?" As soon as she heard that, Winnie scratched her head in frustration. If her mother found out the queen had slapped her, she might storm the palace in a fit of rage. And Winnie didn't want that. She didn't even understand why she was letting it go. This wasn't like her at all. Normally, not even the president's wife could lay a finger on her without her retaliating. But here she was, taking it all in, avoiding trouble, swallowing her pride. Why? Could it be because the queen is Prince Obina's mother? The thought made her blink. She shook her head quickly as if to clear it, then looked at the guard still watching her closely. "I'll figure something out. See you around," she said with a wave, and turned to walk away. Prince Arinzi's chamber. "How did it go?" Prince Arinzi asked in a low voice. His personal bodyguard standing behind him replied, "My prince? She didn't do anything." "What?" Prince Arinzi turned sharply to face him. "You're telling me Obina's mother hit her, and she didn't say a word? No insult? No reaction?" The bodyguard nodded. "I saw it with my own eyes. The queen ordered her maid to slap her. 5 brutal slaps. Her lips were bleeding, but she remained silent." "Interesting," Prince Arinzi muttered, nodding slowly. A mysterious smile played at the corners of his lips. "So interesting. All right, you can go." The guard bowed and exited. Prince Arinzi was still deep in thought when a gentle knock echoed at the door. "Who's there?" he called out. "It's me, son," came a calm, familiar voice. Recognizing his mother's voice, he quickly opened the door, and a graceful woman in her late 50s stepped in. Her rich, dark skin glowed with elegance, and it was clear where Arinzi got his good looks. He was the spitting image of his mother, Queen Susan. "Welcome, Mom. How are your people?" he asked as he returned to his seat on the sofa. Queen Susan took a seat on the edge of the bed. "They're all fine. Your sister filled me in on everything that's been happening while I was away. So, I came to ask, what exactly are you up to?" Prince Arinzi let out a light laugh. "Ah, Adayez didn't even let you rest from your journey." "I don't need rest, son. What I need to know is what you're doing about ascending the throne. Time is running out. I heard Prince Obina is already selecting a bride, so you better tell me you have a plan." "He won't choose any of them." At this, Queen Susan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Prince Arinzi stood, walked over to where his mother was sitting on the bed, and hugged her from behind, his voice low and reassuring. "Mom, have faith in me. You've taught me well, and I won't let you down." "You're not going to tell me your plan?" she asked, her tone curious but calm. All I need from you is to trust that it's a solid plan, Prince Arinzi replied. When I need your help, I'll let you know. Queen Susan fell silent for a moment, then nodded, gently patting his hands. She smiled. Very well then, Mother will trust you, but I hope I won't be disappointed. You won't, Prince Arinzi said with a confident smile. What happened to your face? Oena asked, the moment her daughter stepped into the house. Winnie let out an awkward laugh, quickly using her hand to cover the bruise. It's nothing really. I just had a little fight with someone and got hit in the face. But don't worry, the other person looks way worse. With that, she hurried into her room. But Oena wasn't convinced. She knew her daughter. Winnie wasn't the type to walk away from a fight bruised like that. Something wasn't right. Amaka, Amaka, she called out. The young maiden assigned to keep an eye on Winnie appeared in the sitting room and bowed slightly. You called, ma'am? Yes, I did. Did my daughter get into any fight on her way back from the palace? No, Mom, Amaka replied calmly. I waited outside the palace until she came out. I didn't see her argue or fight with anyone. Then how did she get that wound on her face? Amaka hesitated, thinking for a moment. I think she got that injury inside the palace. Her face looked like that when she stepped out. What? Oena gasped. Winnie, Winnie! She rushed to her daughter's door, only to find it locked. Baby, open the door. Winnie? Mommy, I'm fine. I just want to sleep, came Winnie's voice from inside. What happened to your face? Did something happen at the palace? No, Mom. I'm fine. I told you, it was just a fight. Please, I just want to rest now. Oena knocked again, her concern growing. But Winnie stayed silent. Left with no choice, she slowly walked away, still deeply troubled. Later that evening, Winnie didn't come out for dinner. Even when her father knocked on her door, she gave the same response. She wasn't hungry, just tired, and wanted to sleep. Hotel room. Ugma lay across Prince Arinzi's chest, their bodies tangled in the aftermath of an intense session. For months now, she had been his companion behind closed doors, though, according to the prince, she was nothing more than a tool of satisfaction. My prince, she began softly, trailing her fingers across his chest. Can I ask you a question? Prince Arinzi, eyes closed and lost in thought, replied without much emotion. Go ahead. She hesitated, then continued in a gentle, almost uncertain tone. I heard you're planning to marry Winnie. Why her? For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Ugma thought he wouldn't answer until his deep, sluggish voice cut through the quiet. Why are you so concerned about my personal affairs? She shrugged lightly. I just thought I deserved to know. I've been loyal to you, served you well for a while now. Prince Arinzi let out a short breath. And haven't I promised you a queenship title for your loyalty? The moment those words hit her ears, a smile broke across Ugma's face. But it quickly faded into a frown as another thought crossed her mind. But I don't think Prince Obina likes me, Ugma said quietly. At the interview, he didn't show the slightest interest in me. Prince Arinzi smirked inwardly. Of course, he thought. My brother isn't a fool. Why would he waste his attention on a naive girl like her? He had no real plans for Ugma beyond the bedroom. Her beauty and curves made her the perfect distraction, and he kept her close with false promises, telling her she would one day marry his brother and become queen. But in truth, his real ambition was far more sinister. Remove Obina from the picture and claim the throne for himself. Tradition or not, he was the first prince. The crown belonged to him. He lazily traced circles on her waist, his voice smooth and calculated. My brother can be a little difficult, but surely a woman like you can seduce him. I mean, look at you, so beautiful, so well endowed. I can't do all the work for you, can I? Ugma blushed under his gaze, soaking in the compliment. A spark lit in her eyes as a plan began to form. If Prince Arinzi had fallen for her charms, then Prince Obina wouldn't be any different. After all, men are men. None of them could resist a beautiful woman. 2 days later. It was a hot afternoon, and Winnie was sitting outside her house, listening to music through her headphones, when a palace guard walked into the compound and approached her directly. "Greetings, miss. Prince Obina sent for you." Winnie removed her headphones and replied flatly, "Tell him I'm not available." "I knew you'd say that." A familiar voice echoed from a distance. They both turned toward the gate, and there he was. Prince Obina, dressed casually, was strolling into the compound. "I thought he said he'd stay in the car," the guard muttered under his breath, twitching his lips. Winnie immediately stood up, surprised. She hadn't expected him to come all the way to her house and didn't know how to react. "Greetings, my prince," she said, giving him a slight bow. It caught Prince Obina off guard. This was the first time she had ever greeted him with any respect. "What's with the formal tone?" "I thought you hated all that," he said, amused. "I do," Winnie sighed. "But your mother told me to stay away from you and your sister. I'm just following orders." Prince Obina chuckled. "Wow, I didn't think you were the type to follow rules." "That's because you don't know me very well. Besides, I don't want any trouble with the royal family. They're my dad's biggest clients, and I don't want anything to affect his business." He laughed again. "Fair enough, but don't forget, you promised me a date. I'm here to make sure you keep your word." Winnie blushed slightly. "I didn't promise anything." "Come on," he said, smiling. "I need to take you somewhere." Then he turned to the guard. "Go get the car ready." "Yes, my prince," the guard replied with a bow and walked off. "Let's go," Prince Obina repeated. Winnie wanted to refuse, say something, anything. But no words came. Instead, her feet moved on their own, trailing behind him as they left the compound. Inside the car, Prince Obina focused on his laptop, barely acknowledging her presence. He didn't say a word until they reached their destination, a remote, quiet area. The guard pulled over and parked by the roadside. "You can head back now. I'll call when I need you to pick me up," the prince said to his bodyguard. "Eh? My prince? I should go back?" the guard repeated, as though he hadn't heard correctly. But one sharp glare from Prince Obina was enough. "Yes, my prince." The guard bowed and drove off. Winnie turned to him as soon as they were alone. "Where are we going?"